We're going to be going over the readings from Sunday, which was August 18th. And what I'll do is I'll play a little music till people get here. Well, hello, I'm just giving you all a little chance to show up. Thank you for coming. This Democratic National Convention evening. Thanks for being here. What we're going to do is go over the readings from Sunday. If you have any questions, feel free to put them up. If you haven't subscribed yet, definitely subscribe. And it's always great to share these videos too, because it's helpful information for we spiritual beings having a human experience. Today's August 20th, and the theme for August has been Dawn of the Divine Harvest. And the sermon, the topic for this past Sunday was Conditions for the Bountiful Harvest. Alright, the first reading is from The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes. And just speaking of how to create conditions for the bountiful harvest. Here's what I read from Ernest Holmes. Why are some people happy and prosperous and others unhappy, weak, and poor? Can the answer to this be in mind? Could it be that just as man had thought of himself as sick, and so made sickness, he had thought of poverty and made this condition possible in his experience? Questions like these and many others came into the mind of man and caused him to search even more deeply into the nature of things. Looking about, he saw some succeed and some fail, though all was taking place in the same world and under common conditions. So he knew that it must be something in man and not outside of him that made all these things possible. He realized that conditions did not make themselves. Everything in man's life was run by man himself. In this way, man realized that even his affairs were controlled by thought working through the avenue of the one mind. He discovered that by changing his thought, he could remold his affairs, and that by right thinking, he could bring into his life new conditions. But would there be enough to go around? Should everyone become prosperous? Yes, for instinctive life is limitless. So Ernest Holmes is talking about, the conditions, like, that we all kind of go through this in life where we think about, well, why do some people have some conditions and other people have some other conditions, and what's going on there, do we have any control over that? And Ernest is kind of suggesting here that we kind of do. And when he lived and wrote The Science of Mind almost 100 years ago, there were a lot of people exploring this topic of how, like really that was the first time they really discovered the energy and photons and neutrons and electrons and what do they call them, quarks, and this is like when they were first discovering that these things existed. And so Ernest is posing a really interesting question in that he's asking, these conditions, are they just random, or are they connected to something? And I just want to mention here that I'm of the belief that some of what we experience that's difficult and negative, we can't really consider that we 100% created it that way. But what he's mentioning here, like we really don't have control over like the kind of body that we're born into, or we don't have conscious control over that. Perhaps our souls know. And what circumstances that we're born into, we don't really have control over those already set things. But what he's offering here is a kind of an opening for a discussion about, do we have some dominion over our circumstances? And you might say that even having a different, a certain frame of mind, you might experience something that might just do somebody else in, and you might experience it as like something that brings excitement and a sense of adventure and exuberance. So it is the way that we set the conditions of how we perceive things. We decide how we'll perceive things. So we do have control over that. I mentioned this past Sunday that Wayne Dyer would talk about people that are always seemingly looking for reasons to be offended. And we do see this happening. We see people I think it's kind of human nature, because our brains are kind of, the way that they work is to survey the scene, to look for what's negative. It's kind of wired into our survival brain. And I think, as human civilization have kind of, advanced and things got easier throughout the human history timeline, I think that people started to feel like, well, if we're not like, the brain is wired to look for things that are negative in order to survive, but I think perhaps that sort of transferred into, as human beings evolved and became more advanced, that it got into, like, instead of looking for the negative in order to survive and to avert the risk of losing one's life or being in danger, we kind of maybe turned it into, that offends me, reasons to be offended. Just kind of throwing it out there. Because we do that. And in that case, we're setting conditions for negative things to happen. So these are conscious moment-to-moment choices that we make. Wayne Dyer, he's been gone for about 8 years, I believe, and it's interesting because it's kind of like when you read a book or you see a movie, and every time you read it, and like just a short time ago at Grassroots of Democracy at our meeting, I opted to play Raphael Warnock's speech from day one of the Democratic National Convention, because we need to like revisit things and decide that we're getting something different out. We just find different things that we want to focus in on and pay attention to. So in the same way in life, rather than choosing to look at things and go, I can't believe they're doing that. I'm so upset about that, and I'm so upset about this. And, rather than feeling offended, sometimes we just get offended by the way life unfolds. It was an incredible speech. So we have to kind of revisit the way that we're looking at things. And another Wayne Dyerism is, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So let's think about how we choose the conditions of our thinking. And let's also really just reinforce that we have massive amounts of control over that. And that so many of us are programmed with habitual ways of thinking, leaning into the negative. And I want to encourage everybody to look at, even though you may have things in your life that you would say, there's no way I created that circumstance, I had nothing to do with it, it just is something that keeps nagging away at me and I never seem to break this pattern. But if you really, really look at it, perhaps it was something that was pounded into you just by the mere fact that the people around you believed all that. And that created the conditions energetically and in the mind, created the conditions for you to perceive things in that way, not even knowing why. But we kind of get into trouble when we don't question it, because it's very easy to just go, well, that's just the way I am, and that's just the way it is, and never take that leap, the quantum leap. Well, I never ever had my life be like this before, and so that's the way it is. But if we change the conditions, if we change the way that we look at things, and we decide each and every time that thought, that feeling comes, we're going to notice, not be on automatic pilot. If we just decide, I'm always going to change the conditions that I'm thinking about. Change the condition of my thinking. So I was using kind of the metaphor of gardening and, how the farmer, and I'm joking about my tomatoes out here. I don't know if they're going to grow. I don't know if I have a green thumb. I never did. I'm trying to change my perspective on that, doing the best that I can. Change the condition by changing the way I think about that. And it's a really fun and good example, I think, because it's so simple. So let's, see if we can sort of transfer this into areas of our life. If you think that you're a bad gardener or, bad at something, and then one day you say, I think I'll just stop thinking of myself that way. That's changing the conditions and making kind of your mental soil fertile for something new to occur. And we get into a lot of trouble when we don't ever question it, when we just think that's just the way it is. Then we become victims. We have this vast, amazing, bountiful gift of life where it's like we've been given the formula. We've been given, using the garden analogy again, you're given the good soil. You're given the good fertilizer. You're given the good conditions, right? We take what life has provided for us and let us use it. But first we have to decide how it's going to be for us. It's like more often than not, it's within our control. Most of the time, these are things that are within our control. There's a small percentage of things, like maybe being born with a birth defect or, compromised in some way. Those, I believe, are kind of like, I believe that they're kind of carryovers from past lifetimes. But that's a small percentage. There's a very small percentage of things that, from my perspective, that we really don't have control. Like, we don't have control over our parents, right? Or the way, where we were born or how we were brought up. But that's kind of minuscule compared to what the potentiality is. When we decide, if I want my life to be a certain way, even if we're just talking about a mindset, if I want my life to be a certain way, if I want a situation to be a certain way, I'm going to stop the habit of creating the mental conditions that are not conducive to that happening. We can't go around thinking that we're going to be wealthy if all we ever focus on all day long is how we're not. And that's a really tricky one. But let's not let things that we have thought about in a limited way hang us up. Let's just decide that we will continually keep tabs on it. right? We have to weed the garden. We have to weed out, and you know how the weeds do. They just, if you don't have weed killer, if you're doing organic gardening, the weeds will come. You know, if you're gonna like just be aggravated and offended by the weeds, you're just kind of working against yourself, because it just there are conditions that we have to work with. All right. Does anybody have a question, or am I just being the most amazing teacher that you just have no questions at all? Does it make sense? Hello, hello. All right. Okay, so you understand, right? And what I want everyone to understand too is, just using the gardening analogy again. When you go to plant a new garden, you don't fall back into your old ways that didn't work, right? You have to set the conditions again for your new bountiful harvest, say season to season, year to year. Okay, this is how I set the conditions. So let's do that with our mental state. You know, the motto for the science of mind is change your thinking, change your life. And that's really what Ernest Holmes is speaking of here. You know, there's other things in here too. That's the main gist of it. Change your thinking means change the conditions. If the conditions of your life are not to your liking in any area, there's always going to be something. We might have like 9 out of 10 things are amazing, but that one thing that just gets us every time and drives us up the wall, we have to continually work with. You know, maybe there's a real, invasive weed that you just have to really work hard at getting those negative thoughts out. All right? It's doable, and it's an active process. I just want to kind of close this segment of the conversation before we go to the next reading with this. I'm working with somebody who's working with me on my websites and how to brand what I do. And so she was asking me, what's the difference between being a spiritual counselor, using intuition, and science of mind? And I said, well, being like a psychic and spiritual counselor is being in receiving mode, right? So we receive the inspiration, and then being in science of mind is more of a proactive thing. Like we say in science of mind, treat, like a spiritual mind treatment and affirmative prayer is called the spiritual mind treatment. Treat and move your feet, right? So it's both. So we have to think about those things when we want to create a different reality for ourselves. We have to use the mind to change things. All right. I don't see any questions up there. Thank you for hitting the thumbs up. And thank you for subscribing. I noticed we have so few new subscribers. Yes. Thank you, Barbara, for all your comments. Keep them coming. So I'm not seeing a question, so I'll move forward. Assume the Best from the Teachings of Neville Goddard by Louise Cowley. Do I have here's a really good book. I think this is Neville Goddard. Yes, this is Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. Trying to remember where I got that this needed to be. Oh, I know. Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor, who's no longer with us on the earthly plane, talks about this book and talks about, you got to get this book. I think I got it at Thrift Books. That you have to get the one with the red here. Neville Goddard. Really great stuff. Really great stuff. This is a book that every page you turn to, maybe I'll turn to a page, there's a gem. Let's see what I just turned to. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Ooh. Every page is full of great stuff. And as a side note, I just want to say that last night at the DNC convention, I just really loved, I thought it was so powerful. I really loved how much the concept of having a courageous heart was brought up by Ashley Biden and and Joe Biden, and I think other people too, having a courageous heart. And it takes a courageous heart to set the conditions mentally for what we want. You know, we have to be brave, right? So, assume the best. The mind always behaves according to the assumption with which it starts. That's just another way of saying the mind already has assumptions, and so we always start there. Therefore, to experience success, we must assume that we are successful. Reminds me, Sadhguru said one time, to have success, you must just remove the obstacles to success. We must live wholly on the level of the imagination itself. We have to imagine this thing and to be whatever it is. We have to imagine. If we want to see the world be a more happy, joyful, peaceful place, we have to imagine it. That's what our guided meditation for a Healed America every Tuesday night is all about. We have to imagine it as already so. So we must live wholly on the level of the imagination itself, and it must be consciously and deliberately undertaken. We have to work on our mind, on the way that we think. It does not matter if at the present moment external facts deny the truth of your assumption. If you persist, so important. If it takes a lifetime, it takes a lifetime, but we must persist. If you persist in your assumption, it will become a fact. Signs follow, they do not precede. So that's another way. Neville Goddard is saying basically, when you believe it, then you'll see it, which is another book by Wayne Dyer's. I think that's the title of it. When you believe it, you'll see it. He wrote like 85 books, something crazy. So I don't have all of them, but signs follow. Signs of what we are manifesting, what's in our mind. Signs will follow. What our manifestation will follow our right thinking. Not precede, not before, after. To assume a new concept of yourself is to that extent to change your inner talking. What are we saying to ourselves? And to wake up to what we're saying to ourselves. We might be beating ourselves over the head mentally all the time, just being really critical and judgmental. You know, when we pay attention, we can know what that inner talking is. To assume a new concept of yourself is to that extent to change your inner talking or word of God, and is therefore putting on the new man. So changing your inner talking to, how about divine speech? Speaking divinely. Speaking in a God Spirit inspired way. That would be the new man. Remember, they always said man in those days. Our inner talking, though unheard by others, but it is felt, I want you to know. Others feel what we're thinking. They don't know it, but they do. Our inner talking, though unheard by others, is more productive of future conditions than all the audible promises and threats of men. So what we're doing inside, what we're saying inside, our inner talking is more productive and more predictive of future conditions. How we're thinking and feeling is like producing the future conditions. And it has more power than all the talk, all the audible promises and threats of men, all the other things that people are saying and, you know, fears that people are having. Your ideal, the ideal that you want in your life, the ideal, let's aim high, is waiting to be made manifest, incarnated in you, your ideal. But unless you yourself offer it human parentage. Remember when I was talking about the garden, I could kind of consider, I'm looking at my tomato plant going, I'm taking care of you, right? Talk to your plants. That's like you have to kind of nurture your ideal. You have to give it life. You have to pay attention to it, take care of your ideal. Unless you offer a human parentage, it is incapable of birth. It won't happen unless we offer it our human, attention. You must define the person you wish to be and then assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. That's critical. Practice feeling the feeling that you will have. It's kind of like acting. Practice feeling that feeling. If you want to be a rock star, walk down the street like a rock star. Go to the grocery store like you're a rock star. If you want to be really, really prosperous, well, hang out in prosperous places. Drive a car that feels prosperous to you. Whatever. Buy flowers. My flowers died, but I'm going to get into the habit of getting fresh flowers more often. So you must define the person you wish to be, then assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled in faith that assumption will find expression through you. So faith, we've really got to be in a place of, you know what, it's happening. Why is it happening? Because I feel it happening. Why is it happening? This thing that I want to become manifest, this joy, this love, this abundance, so that I can be at that frequency and send out a greater frequency that heals the world. I have to feel the feeling. I have to imagine it and feel it. I have to be it. I say at the end of Church of Spirituality, usually at the very end, I say, go in peace, be peace, pray for peace. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. This is a time for this. We are in this time right now. Pivotal that we choose. So if you want to be a better version of yourself, and we all want that. That's human nature. That's what we're here for. To expand and grow and to make things even better. To make the world a better place because of the vibrational frequency you're resonating at. We have to be visionaries. We have to have this hope and this knowing that better things are becoming manifest because of what we are right now and right here. Better things are happening because of how we're choosing to be, because we've decided to create the conditions that will make the world a more happy, joyful, peaceful place. And that's our work. And the good news about that is when we're practicing it, we get to have it. Other people benefit from our benefiting from it. And then we can go out and tell the good news to everybody. So let's do that this week. All right? Thank you so much for coming. This video will be uploaded. I noticed the Church of Spirituality service got uploaded more quickly. So maybe we're catching up to that time. We're coming up to that time when the videos get uploaded more quickly with the new channels. Thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow at PNN if you're around. And thank you for your support of Church of Spirituality and this channel. And I'm going to switch over and watch the DNC now. All right. Namaste. Thanks for coming. See you soon. Have a good night.